Hello everybody, another magazine media guide program opening. This was a very hard one. I've never seen anything like this before. This was the Maryland Terrapins against the Athletes in Action. They were a Christian faith-based group that were made of former college basketball players, and they would travel around the country, and they would be the exhibition game opener for a lot of the Division I teams. And they had usually they would have a decent amount of players. Now this is only a literal scorecard with the schedule on the back from this game was 1976, but it came with a very cool Maryland team picture on it. That includes, let's see, just right off the top of my head, there's Larry Gibson, Steve Shepard, who would play on the Olympic team and briefly with the Chicago Bulls. I think that's Brad Davis in the back, or no. Or that may be Brian Mag. It's Brad Davis holding the basketball. It's Brian Magid, the legendary local shooter, in the back row. And Lawrence Boston is all the way in the top row left. And then there's Coach Lefty Drizel. This one, Athletes in Action, players right offhand. I remember Brad Hoffman was a guard for Dean Smith at North Carolina. Bayard Forrest would eventually play for the Phoenix Suns. And Ralph Drollinger was this huge center that played for UCLA, oftentimes as a backup or an emergency shot blocker. And there's the Maryland roster. A lot of these guys off this team wound up being were highly rated locally and would wind up transferring because they weren't happy with their playing time. Bill Bryant would transfer. James Tillman would transfer to Eastern Kentucky, where he would be one of the top scorers in the country. JoJo Hunter would transfer to Colorado, and Brian Magid would eventually transfer to local school, George Washington. And the coaches, you see Lefty Drizel, but Joe Harrington would eventually coach at George Mason in Colorado, and I think Long Beach State. The other two were former players. Will Jones, who played the ABA for several teams, including the Kentucky Colonels, and Howard White, who was a former Terrapin himself. So I don't know the score of this game or who won, but I thought it was a neat little thing to add to the collection. I didn't know it was that thin when I bought it, but I was still pretty happy with it. So since that is so thin, we're going to knock off two more Jim Crockett Memorial Cup tournaments. This is from the 1987 version, held in Baltimore. The brackets, and then there's the late Mr. Crockett Sr. And here's where we'll go through some of the teams. This one's a little thicker than the other one. These are the unseeded teams: the Mulkey brothers, Shaska Watley and Tijo Khan, Denny Brown and Todd Champion, Superstar Bill Dundee and the Barbarian, Nelson Royal and Mike Graham, Ricky Lee Jones and the Italian Stallion. Remember Ricky Lee Jones, and most of these that doesn't happen often. I don't remember who these guys are. The Thunderfoots, the Fabulous Ones, Steve Kern and Stan Lane. But by the time this tournament was held, Stan Lane would be with someone else in this tournament. Mike Rotundo, and Tim Horner, Chief Wahoo McDaniel and Baron Von Raschke, and kind of an unusual team. The Kansas Jayhawks, Bobby Jaggers and Dutch Mantell, looking very country western in their 80s attire. Jimmy Valiant and Lasertron, who was Hector Guerrero under the mask. The Garvin brothers, even though Ron Garvin was actually Jimmy Garvin's father-in-law. The Armstrongs, Bob and Brad, who actually were father and son. The Ivan Koloff teaming with Vladimir Pietrov. The Mod Squad, Tully Blanchard and Lex Luger, Arn Anderson and Kevin Sullivan, the Midnight Express. And by the time this tournament actually occurred, it was Stan Lane in the Midnight Express replacing Dennis Condrey. Giant Baba tagging up with Mr. Takagi. I'm not sure who he was. Don't remember much about him. The Rock and Roll Express, the Road Warriors, the defending champions, and Dusty Rhodes and Nikita Koloff. and the number 1 seed, the World Tag Team Champions at the time, Ravishing Rick Rude and the Raging Bull Manny Fernandez, managed by Paul Jones. If you remember the previous year, the World Tag Team Champions were ranked 3rd. They at least acted like real sports and made them 1st. But the defending champion Road Warriors seeded 3rd. Kind of, again, why did they have Dusty Rhodes and Nikita Koloff over the Road Warriors, who never lost? Featured event on the first evening is Big Bubba Rogers coming after the bounty on Ole Anderson's head. Big Bubba managed by Jim Cornette. And then there was a Ric Flair title defense against Barry Windham the other night. And of course the obligatory souvenir shirt, the shirt package and shirt and book apparently was as much as it went. So they didn't think enough of you to put you ahead of Dusty and Nikita, but you got the back covered. So here's our other Crockett Cup program. This was held, again, a 2-night program, a 2-night event, with the first night in Greenville, South Carolina, the second night in Greensboro, North Carolina. This tournament was won by a makeshift team of Sting and Lex Luger, because I think when I flip through here, you'll see that it was supposed to be Barry Windham and Lex Luger, but in the interim, Barry Windham turned heel on Lex Luger and was not in the tournament, breaking up their team. The Mighty Wilbur and Jimmy Valiant, the Cruel Connection, Kendall Windham and the Italian Stallion, the Japanese entry. Okay, that's the picture was from last year. I don't even remember if they actually showed up. The New Breed, Chris Champion and his second partner, Mark Starr, who I think was his brother, if I'm right. The Jive Tones, Shaska Watley and Tiger Conway Jr., Nelson Royal and Rocky King, the Mexican Twin Devils, who look a lot like the Cruel Connection, the Green Machine, and the Terminator, the younger brother of Road Warrior Animal. Shane Douglas and Ricky Santana, Larry Zbyszko and Al Perez, managed by Gary Hart. The Lightning Express of Brad Armstrong and Tim Horner. Steve Dr. Death Williams and Ron Simmons. The Sheep Herders with Rip Morgan, not pictured. Ivan Koloff and Dick Murdoch, Paul Jones' other team. Ronnie Garvin and Sting, managed by Magnum TA. Ron Garvin does not wind up tagging with Sting. The Varsity Club, Mike Rotundo, who at the time was the World Television Champion, and Rick Steiner. The Fantastics, Tommy Rogers and Bobby Fulton. There's Lex Luger and Barry Windham, who would not wrestle in this tournament as a team. The Powers of Pain, managed by Paul Jones, the Warlord and the Barbarian. The Midnight Express, the current U.S. Tag Team Champions. The Road Warriors. Nikita Koloff and Dusty Rhodes. It says Dusty Rhodes and Nikita Koloff are out of this tournament because of the Dusty Rhodes attack on Tully Blanchard. There's Tully Blanchard and Arn Anderson, the number 1 seed in the tournament. And then you had side matches, the Prince of Darkness death match, which I think both guys were blindfolded or something, like, if I remember. Jimmy Garvin against Kevin Sullivan. That's a very nice picture of Precious. And then you have Dusty Rhodes and his alter ego, the Midnight Rider, in a bull rope match against James J. Dillon. Boy, that sounds really fair. And then there's Ric Flair defending against Nikita Koloff. So there's the Maryland Terrapins against Athletes in Action, the final 2 Jim Crockett Memorial Cup tournaments. So we'll be back with more next time. Hit the blog at thoughtsofrs.blogspot.com. You can always hit the subscribe button here to be notified when more videos pop up. Until then, hope you enjoyed this one, and we'll see you next time.